Good evening. I'll be reading from the NASB version, and I'll be reading Job chapter 12, verse 7 through 10. But now ask the beast, and let them teach you, and the birds of the heavens, and let them tell you. Or speak to the earth, and let it teach you, and let the fish of the sea declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this, in whose hand is the life of everything, of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind?
Good evening, everybody. It is good to see each and every one of you here. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm excited about tonight because tonight we're going to have some fun. I was thinking about the things that we could talk about this evening, and I'm actually kind of doing another lesson that's maybe piggybacking off of the last time that I actually spoke on a Blessed Group Sunday. And that is simply taking a look at God's incredible creation. You know, the passage that Christian just read for us a second ago, talking about the fact that God is in control of everything, right? Life comes from God's hand. And you can ask anything out there, and that's going to be the answer. If we look at the world around us, we have the world screaming at us, saying, look at God. Look at what God has done. Look at His greatness and His might in a variety of ways. And so while this may not necessarily be an official sermon of sorts, it's not necessarily intended to be. And really the biggest thing that I want us to get out of this whole evening tonight is I at least hope that we can walk away saying how cool and great our God truly is. Because we have evidence screaming at us everywhere we look, and it's not hard for us to find it. So for the next few minutes, I simply just want to walk through some more incredible creatures and things that God has given to us to show who He is and His greatness in a variety of forms. And I want us to start with the giraffe. When we think about giraffes, what do you think of? Tall, right? The joke that we always say with the giraffe is, hey, what's the weather like up there, right? When we think about the giraffes are the tallest creature on the earth. As a matter of fact, the males average from 16 to 18 feet in height. The females average about 14 to 16 feet in height. But I want you to take a look at that height, for example, because what we've got here, just the neck, is about 6 feet. So I'm a guy that's about 5'11 and a half or so. So give me, an extra half inch, and I'm about as tall as a giraffe's neck is. Kind of crazy, isn't it? To think about how tall these creatures really are. But because they are so tall, because they have such long necks, that means that they have been specifically designed accordingly. As you can see, their legs are meant to be very sturdy and strong to hold up that amount of weight. These animals weigh a couple tons, which is kind of hard to think about, basically considering the fact that they're standing on stilts. But they've been designed that way to hold the amount of weight. But one of the interesting things about the giraffe is their heart. Their heart is about 2 feet long, and it weighs about 25 pounds. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Because in order to get blood up that 6-foot-long neck, you got to have a pretty strong pump, don't you? So that heart has been designed to specifically work with extra force to get that amount of blood against gravity up into the giraffe's head. But that may pose a little bit of a problem, doesn't it? Because if that strong heart is pumping blood against gravity, what happens when that giraffe needs to take a drink of water? What happens, and if we are familiar with it, I'm sure some of us have experienced it before, you stand up too fast, what happens? You kind of get dizzy, right? Because the blood is rushing in and out of your brain faster than it probably should. Well, if that pump is going as hard as it possibly can, sending blood up that neck, as soon as that giraffe bends its head down, what should happen? Literally, his head should explode. because of the amount of force of the blood that is being sent through that giraffe's neck into its brain. But we still have giraffes. Giraffes are still going around just fine. And why is that? Well, if we take a deeper look into the anatomy of a giraffe's neck in particular, we find something interesting. Because what God has set in place in the neck of a giraffe is a series of valves in its circulatory system. So as the giraffe bends its head down, there are valves in its blood system, in its veins, in its arteries, that actually shut to restrict the amount of blood that goes through, to where there's not a whole force of blood shoving its way into its brain, killing it in the process. But that's just one of the elements of it. There's another side of this that's interesting. If you take a look at this thing right here, this is what is known as the rete mirabile. Don't ask me to spell it or pronounce it correctly, because I actually don't know if that was correct or not. But that's what we're going to call it. Giraffes have also been given an intricate system right at the back of the brain that is called the rete mirabile. In Latin, it means the miracle net. And essentially what this muscle does, what this clump of veins and arteries does, is it acts as a sponge on the back of this giraffe's brain. So that as it bends over, those valves are going to shut, but there's still blood that's entering its way into that brain. And so what that rete mirabile does is it soaks up the blood that's being shoved down into the brain to where it doesn't overflow the brain and kill it. And it acts like a sponge. It soaks everything up so the giraffe can take a drink of water. Then when the giraffe stands back up, those muscles squeeze back, releases the blood, the valve opens, and the giraffe goes on his way. Easy as that, right? But we think about what the world tries to tell us and how these creatures evolved over several millions of years, but there's problems with that. Because if that giraffe didn't originally have the valves in its neck to shut off the flow of blood, when it bent over to get a drink, it should be dead. Later on, if that giraffe didn't have that rete mirabile, those muscles and those veins evolved at the back of its head, same thing would happen. It would bend over and it would die because its brains would blow out. All of this is proof of evident design that has been set in place. That when we see these creatures walking around in the zoo, we can kind of be intimidated by them because of how tall they are, but they are truly evidence of intentional design that all works together so seamlessly and perfectly that we got these animals to enjoy all the time. But the giraffe shows clear intentional design to where they can do this with no problems whatsoever. I don't know about you, that doesn't look like the most comfortable way to drink, but you know, when you're 16 to 18 feet tall, that's the best you got. But don't worry, there are no giraffes that are harmed in drinking water from their own bodies. Predators, different story. But at least their own bodies have been perfectly designed to cut off, to restrict, and to absorb the blood in its body to where they can get up, walk away without getting dizzy, without blowing their brains out at all. Again, these things are subtle and they're simple, but they show incredible design in so many ways. As we move on, I want us to take a look next at the hummingbird. Hummingbirds are some of my favorite birds of all. First of all, just because of how beautiful they are. You look at this image and you see how colorful these birds are. And I love them partially because of how small they are. The weight of a hummingbird is anywhere from 2 grams to about 20 grams. And I know that helps us so much, right? Because all of us can just automatically say, oh, this is 2 grams, this is 20 grams. So I went in and tried to find some things that we can associate with. 2 grams. Picture the weight of 2 paper clips. Give you a perspective a little bit more. 20 grams, 2 pennies. So these birds weigh next to nothing. Depending on the species, they're going to be bigger or smaller. This particular hummingbird here is known as a bee hummingbird. And yes, that is sitting on the back of a number 2 pencil. These birds are small. But again, look at the color there. Look at the design and the beauty that's there that we get to enjoy in that. The other interesting thing about hummingbirds, we're familiar with them because of how they fly, which we'll talk about more in just a second. But I want to talk about their heart rate for a second. Because a hummingbird's heart rate is about 225 beats per minute at rest. So that's when it's sitting, taking a drink from a flower or something like that. During flight, it's about 1,200 beats per minute. I don't know about you, but if our hearts started doing that, we wouldn't last very long. But the metabolism of a hummingbird is so great that it actually has to keep going and keep eating consistently. Otherwise, it's going to fall over dead. Hummingbirds are incredible eaters. They have to eat about 1.5 times their body weight to 3 times their body weight every day in order to stay alive. So that's why you always are seeing hummingbird move from flower to flower, because the time it takes him to get from one flower to the next, he's burned up half of his resources, and he has to keep going. We don't think about these tiny little birds need much, but they need a ton in order to continue sustaining the way that they should. But of course, as we know, hummingbirds are incredible flyers. As a matter of fact, hummingbirds are the only bird that can fly backwards, that can fly side to side, and that can hover in one place. And we think about the hummingbird and why they get that name, because every time you hear them fly by, they sound like they're humming, right? But the interesting thing is the speed at which they fly. Hummingbirds clock in at about 30 to 45 miles per hour. That's how fast that those things can go. And that's more of a steady flight. They can even be faster than that if they are in a dive. But their wings beat at about 70 times a second. Think about that. 70 times a second. That's fast. That's faster than we can tend to grasp. We can't reach that speed no matter how hard we try. But the way that hummingbirds are able to work is because their wings are actually set up on their bodies differently than most birds. When we think about birds, we think about this, and that's how they fly. Hummingbirds' wings actually go in a figure 8, which is why they are able to adjust and move backwards, forwards, side to side the way that they are. Because their wings are mounted on their bodies differently so that they can maneuver and do the things that they need to do. Again, we think about hummingbirds, and this is what they're known for. But something that we may not know about with hummingbirds is hummingbirds, because they have so much metabolism and such a fast metabolism, they kind of would have some trouble sleeping. Because even though they're at rest, even when our bodies are at rest, metabolism is still going on, right? It slows down, but it's still happening. If you got a metabolism of a hummingbird, you stop and take a nap for a little bit, you're still burning all that energy, which is going to be a problem for a little tiny thing that needs to eat up to 3 times its body weight every single day. So what hummingbirds do is they go into a state called torpor, which is essentially a midi hibernation. It's kind of the closest thing that I found comparable to. But it's not just a hibernation over a long period of time. It's hibernation every time they sleep, to where their heart rate decreases, their body temperature decreases, and their metabolism slows down enough to where they're not going to kill themselves when they're sleeping. And it's actually really cute, because there was a video that was found just recently, or at least that I found recently, that just shows the beauty of hummingbirds, but also just kind of the funniness of it. So, guys, if we can go ahead and unmute the computer. I've got a short video that I want us to watch here. All right, here we go.
A scientist in Peru captured this, escaping from the tiny body of a sleeping hummingbird. a high-pitched but unmistakable snore.
So not only do hummingbirds sleep, but they snore. I bet you didn't know that about hummingbirds. See, it doesn't take much to see how great God is. And we just looked a second ago at the giraffe, the largest animal, or the tallest animal in the animal kingdom. But we can go from a giraffe to a tiny hummingbird that weighs 2 paper clips to 2 pennies. And we still see incredible, intelligent design that can only come from God. And we get to keep looking even smaller, because the next thing I want us to take a look at is what's known as the bombardier beetle. When you just look at that title itself, what word stands out to you? Bomb. It's what this bug is. This bug explodes. It has been designed in such a way to have a defense mechanism where when a predator approaches it, it will actually fire a chemical reaction at its predator in a way that will cause them to be blind, cause them to have serious side effects and everything like that, that will last a long period of time so that this bug can escape. But when we start looking deeper into the bombardier beetle, there's more intentionality behind it that shows clear design. When we take a look at this diagram, we see what's going on here. There's actually 2 chemical chambers in this bug's abdomen that both contain different chemicals that come together in this reaction chamber and ignite. They react with each other, and this bug has 2 valves at the back of its abdomen that it shoots this chemical reaction out of. And if you go back and watch videos, I don't have a video of the bombardier beetle. I should have added one in. If you go back and look at videos, it actually sounds like a pop when this bug reacts. Because it's not just shooting it. There's literally a chemical explosion that's happening inside this bug's body every single time it's being attacked. The other interesting thing, that nozzle at the back of this abdomen, it can rotate like a turret to where if the predator is in front of him, he can shoot over the top of him or underneath him. If it's over to the side, he can shoot from the sides. He can shoot from the back. He can aim wherever he needs to shoot this chemical reaction so that he can escape. But it's literally an explosion that happens. As this says, an explosive gas of about 212 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't want that being shot at me. That doesn't sound pleasant. But when we think about, again, what the world tries to tell us, oh, well, this bug, it developed these skills and these abilities over thousands, if not millions of years. Problem. You got 2 different chemical chambers in this bug. What if they mix too early? Well, if one chemical reacts with the other chemical, and they mix too soon without the bug being prepared, what's going to happen to the bug? No more bug, because he's going to die. What if that reaction chamber came later? It doesn't work, because it's defenseless. What if that reaction chamber can only stay in one spot? Well, then if the predator's coming from the front, he's doomed, right? He's going to be lunch. All of these things come together so perfectly that there's no way they can just happen by chance. And we look at a bug as small as this. I meant to say earlier, these bugs are less than an inch in length. We're not talking a big bug here. We're talking very small. But there's intelligent design behind each and every piece of this bug that shows the true creator in all of his glory and power. I would strongly recommend when you go home, look up a video of these bugs doing their thing, because it's wild. It sounds like a pop in the fast, but then when you watch a slow-mo video of it, it's actually shooting several shots, like a machine gun, the whole time. And it's an explosive reaction, that there's heat and there's light that comes out of this thing because it's an explosion. It's truly incredible to witness and to see. When we think about power just within small creatures, another example that we could go to is known as the mantis shrimp. And again, we look at an animal like this, and clearly we can see there's beauty in the color that is there. These things are not very large, depending on the species that we're looking at. They can be anywhere from 3 inches long to 11 inches long at their max. So we're not talking very big here at all. But these animals are known for really 2 things. First of all, they're known for their incredible eyesight. Mantis shrimp have about 12 to 16 photoreceptors in their eyes. What that means is they can see the color spectrum about 12 to 16 ways. To give some perspective there, humans have 3 photoreceptors in our eyes. So the main colors that we get to see are, the red, the magenta, and the yellow, right? The mantis shrimp can see all of those and more. As a matter of fact, mantis shrimp can see UV light, they can see polarized light, and I believe they can also see infrared. All in one place. And on top of all of that, this thing has 2 eye stalks. They both move independently, to where this shrimp can be looking at one thing of food over here and one predator over here and see them clear as day in a way that we can't see. And as a matter of fact, there are times that it's been shown that these prey walk by and they're the same exact color as the sand or the rocks that this mantis shrimp is living in. And the mantis shrimp knows exactly where it is because he can see it on a different field than we can. It's hard for us to see. It's not a problem for him because he can see so differently than we can because of these powerful eyes. But the other thing that the mantis shrimp is really known for is for their punch. These things pack a fight when they need to, both as a defense mechanism and also as a way to hunt and as a way to prey, or to catch prey. They have a specialized claw that's not even really a claw. If you take a look here, these things right here are their quote-unquote claws. But what does that look like to you? It kind of looks more like a club, right? So when we think about how these things have been designed, these are basically spring-loaded clubs that are ready to attack when need be. And we'll hear it in just a second because we've got another video that I want us to see. But their punch is roughly 50 miles per hour, which is it has roughly the same acceleration and velocity and force of a .22 caliber bullet. And as the video is going to say here in just a second, their punch is so fast and so forceful, it actually causes friction in the water, and it makes the water around the punch boil because of how fast this is. Again, we've got another video here, so guys, if you want to maybe bump up the volume a little bit more so we can hear it better, but this is a small taste of what you can see with the mantis shrimp.
Too close. With the velocity of a .22 caliber bullet, the mantis shrimp strike is the fastest in the animal kingdom. The assault is so fast that friction makes the surrounding water boil. The devastating punch knocks limbs off the victim and delivers a quick death.
I love the video there of it punching the crab, and the crab's claw just clean falls off. I don't know about you, I don't want to get into a fist fight with that thing. If I know that my arm could potentially come off as a result, yeah, no thank you, right? Again, these creatures are small in comparison to ourselves, but we see how strong they can be. And we can see the might and the force that's there. That doesn't just happen. That doesn't just evolve over a matter of several billions of years. That can only be a testament to incredible design that God has set in place for us to see. Again, they may be small, but they are mighty. And they're mighty because of how God has made them. And they show His might. Now going from something smaller to a little bit bigger, I want us to take a look at whales for a second. Whales, I think my dad might be watching. Whales are some of his favorite animals ever. He loves the whales. He always has. And while there's so many different varieties of whales out there, they have several things that are in common with each other. First of all, whales weigh several tons. We're talking up to the hundreds of tons. And we think about how big they are, and yet take a look at this whale right here. He's literally launching himself out of the water. And these creatures are strong enough that they can do full breaches, where the entire body of the whale is out of the water, which is why people like to go whale watching, right? I mean, that's what you're hoping for when you get to go whale watching, is see these whales breaching and going through, and it looks like so much fun. I don't know what's going through their head when they do that. I don't know if they're really trying to cool down or what, but man, it just looks so much fun to just go up and display like that. Again, when we think about whales, there's so many different types, and I know I'm looking at this broadly, but whales are known as some of the deepest divers of all time. As a matter of fact, to give some perspective here, recreational scuba divers dive down to about 130 feet into the water. Not very deep, all things considered. The world record scuba dive is recorded to be about 1,090 feet, which is otherwise known as 332 meters. So deep, but not quite deep enough. Most submarines, like military submarines and whatnot, they dive at around 2,000 to 4,000 feet under the surface. Sperm whales, a specific species of whales, regularly dive about 1,000 to 2,000 meters, which is about 3,280 feet to 6,500 feet. Deep, right? But the record holder for the deepest dive recorded by a whale came from a Cuvier's beaked whale. I don't know how you pronounce that necessarily, but some type of whale. The dive of 2,992 meters, which in feet is 9,800 feet. Part of the reason why we struggle to go so deep isn't just because it's hard to see. It's because of pressure. We think if you send something down deep enough, if you're not adequately prepared to adjust for the pressure, you're going to be crushed. But these whales dive down deep at depths that are difficult for us to reach with no problem. Now, how is that? If their bodies weren't designed to be able to take that much force. Their blood vessels, their arteries, their hearts, they've all been designed to adjust the pressure in their bodies on the fly. When we think about how big some of these animals are, we know as you drop in the water pressure changes every, I think it's 12 feet or so. So if you've got a 20-foot long whale, you've got two different pressures that are dealing with that whale all at the same time. But its body can automatically adjust itself to maintain the internal body pressure and blood pressure so that they can dive down deep with no issue whatsoever. Again, simple, subtle things, but it shows their power and their might. I love this picture because this is a submarine next to a whale. And it's hard to even really see the whale because of how dark it is. The light doesn't get very far, so you got to rely on, man-made light in order to see. But these whales dive down this deep with no troubles. Another interesting thing about whales is how well they can hold their breath. I don't know how long you have been able to go without breathing underwater, but it's probably not very long, right? The record holder for the longest time period of holding your breath underwater by a human being was 24 minutes, 37.36 seconds. And we think how incredible that is. Man, I mean, that's almost 30 minutes that someone was able to stay underwater without coming up for air, without breathing. And while we do have to understand, okay, that's human lungs, our lungs are quite smaller than a whale's lungs, but that doesn't change the fact that these creatures can do what seems to be impossible. Because whales, again, those sperm whales, can spend around 90 minutes underwater without coming back up for air. Hour and a half, people, of not breathing, of holding your breath. Imagine how much that would take. And again, these creatures are constantly on the move. They're constantly going. They're using that oxygen. But they can go an extended period of time without having to come up for air. That same record holder for the deepest dive also holds the record for the longest time without coming back up for air. Because that same whale, during that same dive, the dive lasted 222 minutes without coming up for air. Which makes sense, because if you go down that deep, you're not going to get up to the surface very quickly. But 220 minutes of holding your breath. I dare some of you to try that sometime. I don't think it's going to work very long. But these creatures show design. They show the might. They show the greatness that God puts on full display for us to enjoy and for us to experience. As we close, there's one more that I want us to take a look at. And it's technically known as the megapode. For some of you, you might be familiar with the Australian incubator bird. If that's also not something you're familiar with, now you are. But the Australian incubator bird, or the megapode, what you're seeing right here, it's not a very big bird. The thing weighs only about 3 to 4 pounds, so not very big at all. But these things are known for a variety of reasons, one of them being their nests. The way that the megapodes work is the males build the nests. That is their job, at least one of their jobs. And they will build these nests, sometimes, depending on the species, the size is a little bit different, but there have been some nests that are recorded at 50 feet across and 20 feet high. They will dig into the ground, they will grab brush and moss and whatnot and pile it all up to make sure that this nest is adequate for the females. The females will come along and check things out, make sure everything's okay, and if they like it, over the next 7 months, the females will lay about 25 to 30 eggs. But here's something interesting about those eggs. Each egg weighs about 1.5 pounds. But again, think about the fact that that bird only weighs 3 to 4 pounds. So how is it that a 3 to 4 pound bird can lay 25 to 30 1.5 pound eggs and survive? That doesn't work unless God made them that way. But once the female lays the eggs, she leaves. She abandons the nest. And now, it's the male's job. And what the male does is truly incredible. Because the male has to keep that nest at a consistent 91 degrees Fahrenheit and 99.5% humidity. Now, for the men in the room in particular, since the male is the one doing this, I'm going to ask the guys in here. How well can you walk outside, stick out in your hand, and say, yep, it's 91 degrees? Yep, the humidity seems a little bit low. Let me go make it a little bit better. We can't. But somehow, this bird has a built-in thermometer and humidifier to be able to go in and say, oh, too hot. And it'll take some stuff off, Or it'll put more sand on top to reflect the light. If he goes in and sees that it's too cold, then he'll start piling on more insulation to help it to be at the right temperature and the right humidity. We don't understand how it can do this, but it can. And we as Christians have the understanding. We might not understand how it works, but we know why it works because God made it that way. And so the male continually tends to this nest day after day, making sure that it's at exactly the temperature and the humidity that it's supposed to be so that these eggs can live. When it's time for the eggs to hatch, guess what? The male leaves too. And now you've got a whole bunch of eggs that are sitting somewhere in the middle of this 20-foot deep nest. And those eggs have to hatch. When we think about eggs and we think about birds, a lot of times birds have the egg tooth, right? That special tooth that's part of their beak that they can use to break the shell. Megapode eggs don't have that. Megapode chicks don't have that. Instead, what they do is they use their claws. They have very sharp and powerful claws that they use to scratch their way through. Their egg shells themselves are designed with special air vents that almost look like ice cream cones. That when they're smaller, air still gets to come through, but the bigger that they get, the more oxygen that they need, so they can scratch through and remove that layer, and as it gets closer to the edge, those air vents get bigger, so it has the proper oxygen that it needs. But let's say one of those megapode eggs finally hatches. Where is that megapode chick? It's in the middle of the nest that may be 15 to 20 feet below the top of the nest. So where's that chick going to go? How does he know which way is up? How does he know how to get out? Mom and Dad are gone. They're not going to be of any help. But somehow these chicks know how to get up. They don't go out sideways, they go up. Which, if you've ever been in a period of time where you're upside down for a while and your senses are completely blocked off, you don't know which way is up, down, left, right, or in between. But this bird, freshly hatched from his egg, knows exactly which way is up. And as a matter of fact, he starts digging and clawing his way through all of this stuff, and he packs down the debris, the dirt, the moss, whatever, underneath him to basically lift him up as he goes. To where finally he gets to the top of the nest, and he's free to go on his way. These chicks are born, they hatch essentially fully formed. Most birds, when they hatch from their eggs, they don't have any feathers on them. They got to build up the feathers over time. Megapodes hatch with feathers ready to go. Shortly after they're out of the nest, they can fly. Shortly after they get out of the nest, they are completely on their own because Mom and Dad have left. But the same routine happens every single year. Those birds hatch, they find their way out of the nest, they start living life, and when the next season comes around, the males are going to go and build a 15-foot high nest that Dad never told them how to build. The females are going to come, they're going to lay their 25 to 30 eggs that should kill them because of how big they are. And everything continues on just as normal. Again, we think about these creatures. And maybe I make more of a deal out of it than I should. I don't necessarily think so, though. When we think about God's creation, we can't help but use the word incredible. Because everything around us is proof of who God is. And while it's sad that so many people in the world try to look at everything that's around us and say, there's no way there can be a God, we are so blessed to be where we are, to have a relationship with the God of the universe. And we don't have to, argue our way through things. We don't have to try to explain all the odds and ins and outs of, well, this might be the way that this happened over so many billions of years or whatnot. We can rest and enjoy the fact that we know, no, God just made it that way. And these things are truly a testament to how great God is, to how beautiful God is, to how much authority God has. I hope that as we spend time just looking around us, that we see God's beauty. I hope that we can see God's greatness and His incredible authority. Because the God that created everything also created you. And He wants a relationship with you. He wants us to be His people. He wants us to come to Him, to know Him intimately. And He has promised us eternal life. Life that we get to spend with Him forever. The God that created all these incredible things wants you to be with Him. And that means that there are some steps that we have to take. We have to be willing to submit to Him. We have to be willing to follow what He has instructed us to do. To become a child of God, we have to do the necessary steps. We have to commit our life to Christ. We have to be washed of our sins and to live faithfully under His rule. But when we do, everything changes in life for the glory of God. And when we do, life changes for us in ways that we get to see the beauty. We get to see the awesomeness and the incredible nature of our God in full display every time we open our eyes. The question I want to leave each and every one of us with tonight is, do you have a relationship with our God? Do you have a relationship with the one who designed you and knows you better than you do yourself? He knows you and He wants to have a relationship with you. If you have a need that you need to make known tonight, we encourage you to come forward now as together we stand and sing.